Hello and welcome to Klimatic Scale. My name is Dash. Urban industries at the heart of our economy need to change to stay competitive. And we need them to change for the planet to thrive. In Klimatic Scale podcast, we focus on examples of what actually works. In this urban chapter, we talk to innovators in built environment, real estate, construction. We show the toughest challenges and the best working solutions. Our guest today is Sarah Peramala, Head of Innovation Management at DIEAG, a real estate development company from Berlin. Let's say hello to Sarah. Good afternoon.
Hello, Dash. Thank you for having me. Really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, also very happy. Can you tell a little bit about yourself and about the company you're working for?
Absolutely. My name is Sarah Peramala. I am Head of Innovation Management here at DIEAG. We are a Berlin-based real estate developer and asset manager. And so far, we've dealt with a project volume of about 2.5 billion euros. And what we essentially do is we focus on energy efficient commercial and mixed use properties, especially district developments, in collaboration with institutional clients. So what we do differently, or what sets us apart basically from our competitors, is that we feel that we're not only building properties or spaces, we're actually developing entire ecosystems for the cities of tomorrow. And so we place a very strong emphasis on topics like sustainability, innovation, digitalization. And essentially my role involves shaping and scaling innovations in lab formats, not only within the company, but also for other companies, especially around energy, smart city, ESG topics.
Oh, that's amazing. I find it wonderful how DIEAG is focused on sustainable topics and also on energy efficiency.
Yes.
And this connection to whole ecosystem building, district development.
Yeah.
This is so fitting for within this chapter. We are talking a lot about specifically energy solutions for different industries. And maybe can you share a little bit about where do you see this energy efficiency movement, energy sustainability moving? Where do you think it's going and what are the main trends?
So essentially, I think energy is a huge topic in the built world. I think for a long time, the real estate sector has been, so to say, and continues to be. And in the general transformation of all our societies and all our businesses also towards climate neutrality, this is a very core topic that has been actually accompanying us for, I would say, a decade. There have been different, let's say, focus points on the construction side, where you're talking about materials, you're talking about optimizing just the physical structures themselves. Yeah. But on the other hand, you have more and more projects that are actually dealing with what comes after you actually construct a building. So what happens when there's actually life there? How do you optimize certain aspects to create value, not only for your tenants, but also for broader society and the entire transformation towards climate neutrality? So in essence, this is also what we are tackling. So the integration of, for example, renewable energy systems into the built, into the urban fabric is a huge topic. And especially when you are dealing with district where you have this little small world, this little ecosystem in and of itself, energy plays a huge role. Looking at how you're actually going to supply energy, whether it's a commercial district or a mixed use district, and what kind of technologies you're implementing. This is a huge topic that is on everyone's mind. For us, for example, from how to integrate geothermal energy or photovoltaic to sector coupling, to smart grids, to smart metering, to buildings that can digitally communicate amongst each other. So you as a tenant, exactly optimize that you as a tenant know, okay, what is my current energy, what's it called? Usage, thank you. Where can I find, I don't know, my next e-bike that I want to hire? There's a huge complex of...
Yes, there's so many different topics. Are you focusing mostly on new objects or also on existing districts and infrastructure?
We do both. We do both. So for example, and this is also one of our prime examples that we also showcase, to show how we work. We recently handed over one of our bigger district projects here in Berlin, the BU Bernsufer, which is located in Oberschöneweide.
Congrats.
Yes, thank you. Where we basically had a commercial project, 10 hectares with about 280 square meters rental space. And this was a mix of protected existing buildings and new buildings. And we tackle both issues.
We talk about access to green energy. What are some of the main challenges there and needs you have observed that are maybe not quite solved?
So I think when you are looking at bigger district projects where it's not about a single object that you're developing, you have, let's say, you magnify the scale of issues that you have to tackle with. For example, with the BU Bernsufer project, for us from the beginning, our goal was to create a district that is energetically self-sufficient and energetically self-sufficient with locally produced renewable energies. And so this in and of itself was a huge challenge for us because of our prospective tenants who were basically in the light industrials or laboratories, research facilities.
It was commercial.
It was commercial, yes. When you have basically such tenants who have a very high energy demand, you need to approach planning a district in a bit of a different way. Because on the one hand, of course, you're looking at concretely from a construction standpoint, how can I reduce the base energy demand in this district from the get-go? And then how do I combine this with cutting-edge technologies so that you have a holistically planned energy system that can carry itself? So we basically had a mix of different elements. So for instance, we wanted to use water-bearing clay ceilings for cooling and heating so that you don't have heater or air conditioning. We looked at water retention systems. You can actually use like wastewater as well more efficiently. We had an interesting challenge. So all the new buildings in this district, we're going to have rooftop parks that were accessible for public.
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful on the one hand.
I know it's also quite expensive, right?
Yes, it is. But it really, I think, enhances the quality of your stay on the district. But for us, the challenge from an energy perspective was when you have rooftop parks, you don't have the space for solar panels. So then we had to figure out, okay, how can we still incorporate as much solar as possible? And then we moved into integrating solar panels into the building facades themselves. We looked into using outside air, using waste heat from industrial processes. So in the end, trying to find a way to fully cover the energy demand. And then our first anchor tenant moved in or planned to move into our district, ASML. And we immediately knew, okay, we have to find some other technology to carry like this goal because the amount of heating and cooling they required, we would not have been able to accommodate just by using solar or waste heat.
With object-based
sources, with the object-based sources. So this is when we decided to explore geothermal energy. And this was a very interesting project for me, especially. It was a pet project of mine, where we basically partnered with Ever, which is a Canadian company that offers a very unique, clean geothermal system that actually could well be a game changer in district heating worldwide. And what we basically noticed, though, we had a technology that was very promising that we wanted to implement on our site. However, we quickly realized that the political and regulatory frameworks to enable us as real estate developers to actually use this technology were not yet given. I think oftentimes when people are standing in front of such a challenge, it could be like, oh, okay, it doesn't work, so maybe we look elsewhere. But we decided, okay, if these frameworks don't exist, we're going to create them. And what we did is we brought together all the relevant stakeholders from all the concerned fields in a deep geothermal lab to discuss how we can successfully implement this technology in a city like Berlin, which has, of course, a lot of challenges. And anyway, I think urban environments, you have restrictions concerning space, etc. And
so it's more regulatory constrictions, or what were the limitations? Where were you coming from?
So the limitations were basically that the Berlin Senate has, since I think 2.5 years, roadmap for the development of geothermal energy in Berlin. And you have basically two different types of deep geothermal technologies. One is basically hydrothermal geothermal energy, and the other is petrothermal geothermal energy. And so our technology that we wanted to implement is this petrothermal closed loop technology. And it was a challenge to basically reconcile different policy framework. So you have, on the one hand, we have the Berlin Senate that wanted to have a geothermal region over the entire city of Berlin, where they basically also hand in the application in order to gain licenses to actually search for geothermal resources. And then they, in partnership with private actors, wanted to develop basically the exploration of geothermal energy in Berlin. And we, on the other hand, at our project, we knew we have a set deadline until when the buildings have to be built.
You want to do it now.
Exactly.
And they were like, oh, our plan is to do it in 2 years.
And this is why we very early on knew that we need to bring stakeholders together so that also the private sector and the public sector is in dialogue, that the public sector also understands where are the bottlenecks. Because at the end of the day, for these technologies to actually be economically viable, they need business use cases that in reality work. Because, of course, you have technologies that are pushed initially with subsidies from the government, which is great. But for them to be sustainable in the long term, they have to actually have fine ground.
Monetize properly.
They need to monetize properly. And we basically had stakeholders from the European Parliament, from the Berlin Senate. We had the mining authorities on board, investors, the district heating companies.
Was it hard to bring all of the stakeholders together? How long did it take you? And what was the main leverage, maybe?
To be really honest, it wasn't hard to bring them together because I think, and this is something that I find very, very positive, everyone is working towards a similar goal. We all are committed to the climate neutral goals that, for example, Berlin has to become climate neutral by 2045. And what we offered essentially, and this is also what I guess, come back, or we will come back to when we're actually talking about startups. When we have these district projects, they are great microcosms for testing different technologies, different approaches to actually learn what works and what doesn't work. So essentially, we are offering the built environments where others can also test their approaches and their technologies. And so the leverage, it was also one of the big lighthouse projects in Berlin. So from that respect, it's also very, there's an incentive to be part of something like this. And also, I think what was very appealing to many was that we were very ambitious and very enthusiastic and motivated to get these topics off the ground. This lab for deep geothermal energy was a very fruitful platform for all of these actors to come together. And we always received the feedback, had we not brought this into life, these people wouldn't have spoken to each other in that kind of context.
Okay, that's wonderful. But it also seems from other challenges you were mentioning, there's a lot about whole ecosystems of products. It's never about just one solution or another.
Yeah.
Let's say for such a project that you were mentioning, how many solution suppliers approximately in the end you needed to involve?
Specifically for the deep geothermal energy topic, or just the entire
for the
project?
topic, and generally just for the audience also to get the perspective.
Yeah.
Because I bet it's quite some.
Yeah, so for the geothermal energy topic, I think we had in the end about 25 different stakeholders who were actively working with us in the lab. For the project itself, to be honest, I don't know, because there was so many different topics. I was in charge of the energy side.
For the energy side.
For the energy side, no, there were a lot more. So we designed our energy concept in collaboration with Gazak Solution Plus.
Oh, great.
And our project was essentially practically implemented by Strabag Züblin, with whom we have a long-standing partnership. And then you have all the sub companies that your contractor basically contracts.
Yeah.
So I really can't tell because there were so many technologies involved. We were also...
Is it in hundreds?
I wouldn't say in hundreds. I think it's still, I would say it would be a mid-ranged two-digit number because it's like the complexity is also like where does it start, where does it end?
Of course.
For instance, we were planning on building an ice storage facility, and then you have the companies that provide like different sensors, or you also have companies that help you design an online visualization of such a ice storage facility. So it's a lot. But
so what we have observed so far, there would be many solutions on the side of the energy source. Another is more about like energy efficiency. So from your perspective, with not only for this project but others, how hard it is to find the whole combination of solutions with the timeline that you have, because you have a special situation compared to some other industries, right?
Yeah.
It's very timeline based, deadline based. How are you juggling this?
So I think one of the most important aspects for me personally is to differentiate between what the energy topic actually means for you, for your project. So oftentimes you have project developers, I think, who see the energy topic more like a compliance issue, or you're just trying to figure out, okay, these are the regulations. How do I need to implement this in my building that in the end I'm like certified and that's it? But I think the real beauty of it lies when you actually look at energy more as like a value driver and a differentiator. And this is what we are trying to tackle, because I think on the CapEx side, but also on the OpEx side, tackling like energy topics has a huge advantage. Also in terms of the attractiveness of your properties for tenants, but also for investors, because this is where the market is going towards. This is where the regulations have been pushing us for the last couple of years. In that respect, this early integration of all the stakeholders that are necessary in order to successfully complete projects is very important. And practically also working across discipline. You're bringing together not only engineers, planners, utility suppliers, but also looking at the public sector. You're looking at startups. You're looking at city level strategic planners, you know, that you very early on already know these are the people you need to involve, and that you don't necessarily start planning something that in the end you can't really implement the way you want it because you haven't looked into everything.
It seems like a bit of a chicken and egg situation. You need to have an idea what is possible to make the plan, but then one still needs to find the solutions.
Yes.
I'll use this as a segue for the solution search.
Right.
How does the process look like for you? I understand you have this long-term partners, but when do you decide to actually look externally for new service providers, and when can those be startups?
So for us, our general philosophy is our goal is to always build the best properties and the best districts that are as resilient as possible, as innovative as possible, and as sustainable as possible. And at the same time, of course, all in the framework of being economically viable. And so for us, there isn't really a set point where we say, okay, now it's time to look elsewhere. It's more of an organic process. We are a company of about 25 individuals. This is how big our team is. And what is also very special about DIEAG is we have 2 people who are solely dedicated to innovation management. So me and my colleague, Natalie, this is essentially our job, to keep our ear very close to the market, to know what are the latest technological innovations and what can we actually bring into our planning, into our properties and our districts. This is also where we are in very close collaboration with startups, because we often go to different events, often also hosted by you, to actually find what's going on and very early on figure out ways to enable them also, depending on which phase of development they themselves are, to see how we can support them in actually scaling up also their solutions. And oftentimes, due to the fact that our tenants are, especially in the commercial developments, oftentimes also industry companies, we're able to also offer this connect between this is an interesting solution that we can build that we can use for our district, but maybe it's also interesting for one of our tenants to implement within their own spaces.
So you act almost like a multiplier for solutions that actually work.
Exactly. So these labs that we've created and actively live, they're platforms, actually network platforms, to bring also people together to create more value.
And how do you sustain these labs? Are they organized by you, or are there some other people who are in charge of running it?
No, we run them ourselves. We run them ourselves, yes.
And how many of these labs approximately do you have right now?
So for the BU Bärensulfur project, we had 4 labs, one for energy, one for food, one for urban development, and one for arts and culture. And now that we've handed over the project, we've combined all of them into one lab. So we have it's called the Innovation Lab, which basically uses the methodology that we developed in this project, but can apply it not only to these 4 topics, but also other topics beyond food, energy, urban development, and
so bringing
arts.
stakeholders within it. What about startups as service providers? And what have been your experience working with them?
Yes, so I mentioned we actively scout and partner with startups, especially those that offer modular, scalable tech. Being in Berlin, which is the startup capital of Europe, I know there's a bit of a war with Munich, but we're sitting at the source of vast community of very intelligent, bright people who are coming up with such amazing solutions to a lot of problems that we face. And I personally have had very positive experiences working with startups who are also very much willing to look into also what are your needs. So I think oftentimes people have an idea of what could work, and technologically it might be very interesting, but the practical implementation in like a real estate development project, for instance, brings in other issues. And oftentimes my impression was there's a very big openness to engaging in dialogue, to really having this problem-solving approach. And this is really fun also.
Quite some other innovation leaders have mentioned this, that for them it's very important that the startup is problem-oriented. How can a startup know what type of challenges are really interesting for you to solve?
I think in a way, it's in every industry. I think this is applicable. You need to know your customer at the end, right? So you need to have very clear use cases. You need to be also aware of exactly where you are in your startup life journey. So technical readiness is a big issue for us. As we mentioned, we have very strict timeframes as to when
you want to actually implement it.
Exactly. So if a startup has an exciting, I don't know, hydrogen technology that would be super great for one of our projects, but the timeline that they're working with is completely different to ours, this will not be a fit. So this is very important. And I think also, as I mentioned before, the willingness to actually be open to co-develop partners is also a requirement, because otherwise you might be working in your little bubble on something that's technologically really exciting, and that's perfectly fine. But to actually make this economically viable and be able to monetize on what you're doing, you need to pull in feedback from different stakeholders from the get-go.
How do you manage it with a startup that has certain product readiness, but maybe they have had even a few pilots already, but you're still not sure how applicable it will be, how well it functioning it will be for your object? I imagine it can be quite risky to make a bet on them and just include.
Yeah.
So do you run any like micro pilots for specific objects? How does it work?
Yes. So oftentimes, depending on what it is, what kind of technology it is, you also have a lot of options to already run digital simulations. Also already in terms of trying to find a fit within your own project planning, there's certain due diligence processes that you undergo as well. And at the end of the day, it also really depends on how much you believe in the potential of the startups themselves, to understand, okay, is this something, what level of risk are we taking here? Are we willing to do it? Are we not willing to do it? And so this is a very, I would say, case-by-case analysis. I wouldn't be able to say, okay, this is how we generally do it, because this is also something that we pay a close attention to, that we really look at what is this certain startup bringing to the table, how can we use it, what is the value added for who, and then weigh this against the risk that we might be taking.
Yes, I understand. And with the budgeting, how does it work? Do you have in advance already set budget for specific solutions? Is it very granular, or is it more bigger, like kind of higher level?
This again it differs from project to project. Of course, you have for the construction projects themselves, you have your budget, you have the allotments according to which project phase you are in. You have your budgets for the building materials, for contractors, for subcontractors, etc. For the labs themselves, essentially it depends on the goals that we are trying to achieve and how cumbersome they might be and how much basically we need to do ourselves. So we don't have, I would say, a set budget. We also look at this case by case.
Because it's an ecosystem, basically.
Exactly,
Also.
exactly.
And do you have any examples of successful cases when you were working with a startup or maybe like less established technology and it went really well?
So essentially, I joined DIEAG almost 2 years ago, and I was on the Bärenzufer project. And the timeline was so that when we handed back the project to the investor, we were in, let's say, the beginning of implementation phases with different startups. I was looking very intensely with a startup called Scale Energy that offers battery storage, how to... Yeah, yes, is a really, really cool guy, and their business model and their technology is also very exciting. Or a startup called 15 Minutes. It's a mobility solutions provider where essentially what I was trying to do was integrate battery storage and mobility and e-mobility solutions within our energy system, that we have this sector coupling between mobility and energy. So essentially, one of the projects that we were exploring to also establish as a pilot project was looking towards establishing a pilot project for bi-direct charging. So essentially, you have a commercial district where from 8 in the morning till 5 in the evening, you have X% of electric vehicles that are on site with a certain battery charge capacity, maybe if they are plugged into the wider energy system to also be used. And we were looking at how to couple this with on-site battery storage and the mobility concept in order to basically pilot a bi-directional project there. So these are, for example, examples of startups that we work together with. In a way, the company that we partnered up with for the deep geothermal project could also be considered a startup. They're currently launching their first commercial project in Europe, in the south of Germany, close to Munich in Geretsried. But when it comes to, I think, on the financing side, et cetera, there's always a debate. Okay, when are you really a startup and when are you not? But it was a very, I would say, very fruitful experience to actually think these complex topics out with different partners who also, are open and willing and enthusiastic to engage and actually tackle like the complexity. And understand that when you work together, that you're really working together, and it's not I'm trying to sell you something and then I'm trying to buy something off you and trying to
It's
cut
a
costs.
collaboration.
It's a real collaboration.
I like the name lab. How you call this?
Yes.
Ecosystems. It's really such a good fit.
Yeah.
I have a very interesting. Thank you so much. I have a last question to you, and that is about this sustainable DNA. So you have mentioned also that there are some developers who are addressing net zero buildings topic a bit more from the kind of regulatory goal, more as they're forced to do this, and you truly have it as a part of your DNA. Where did it come from? What were the components that led to net zero buildings and sustainable topics, specifically sustainable energy, being such a core part of this company?
So I think it was a mixture of personal belief, a foresight into what in the coming years be the issues or the topics that will set you apart from your competitors. And this emphasis on sustainability is very much driven by our management here, who very early on also recognized with our projects that this is the direction that the industry will be heading in. and wanted to also take advantage of the first mover dynamic. This really brings together, I would say, personal motivation and actually, hard economic facts that we see that if we invest in these topics today, our buildings will have a very different value in the future, which of course is very important to the institutional clients that we work together with and our investors, because this is what they also deem as very important. So this is what we're always trying to basically bring together, things that are not only ecologically sustainable, but also economically viable.
To any startups or innovative solution providers who might be listening and who might want to work with you, what will be your advice?
So I think if anyone's really interested in working together with real estate developers, I think my advice would be do your homework, really understand the real estate development life cycle and where your solution fits in. I would also advise them to be a bit patient, but also persistent, because timelines in these sectors, depending on what kind of project it is, for instance, district projects could be something along the lines of 7 to 12 years that they're looking at. Try to understand which is the right time to address a certain developer, but also have the confidence that, if you propose your solution early enough, you might be able to actually make a big impact for these projects themselves. I think what's also important, oftentimes when I go to different fairs or networking events and speak to startup founders about their product, oftentimes I'm in this conversation and I'm thinking, I love the idea. It sounds really exciting. But tell me, how can I build this into a building? Like, how does this work? How does this integration work? So speak the language of value. Show how your solution can really cut costs, how it adds resilience. Because at the end of the day, trying to save the world and making it a better place is a great cause. This is like an ultimate goal, and there are smaller milestones, time horizons that people need to accommodate and really speak this language of value. And I would, as always, just say, don't sell a product, sell a partnership. And so try to get into this partnership mindset. And it will not only lead to increasing your chances of actually being included or integrated into a real estate development project, but also on the other hand, optimizing your own product, because you will build something in collaboration and then you achieve better results. So collaborating always achieves better results.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere. See you next time.